Hi, I'm Paul.
And I'm Tiffany.
To some, we could be called career wizards.
And to others, sometimes we seem like therapists. However, we definitely are not.
But for you, we are the co hosts of the Career Boosters podcast.
Knew some of the challenges that I faced, and they were never viewed negatively. Everybody was warm and embracing and valued and appreciated my contributions, and really the appreciated the personal and the time that I took with each of the students and the supervisors, and my willingness to learn the role and do it as best as I could do.
Hello, and welcome to the Career Boosters podcast, episode 13 of season 2. Crazy. I think this is episode 50. I am terrible at math. We like to talk about strengths, great at talking, all of those things. Math, not so good. Weakness, we'll stay away from that. Today we are very excited to talk about emotional intelligence. And when we think about successful leaders or great managers that we've had, we don't usually think that they were the smartest people in the room, that they could solve any sort of technical problem. We think about how they made us feel. When we explored emotional intelligence with our MBA students this week in the first of a two kind of week session on this topic, we started by asking them about a story of the greatest leader, manager, or coach that they have had. We had lots of words and phrases like I trusted them, they were inclusive, they communicated clearly, they listened to me, they were very supportive. We then asked them about their observations about the words and phrases that they were hearing. And the big theme was there was no technical skills mentioned. So we enlightened them onto Marcus Buckingham's quote around people leaving managers and not companies. And, 50% of people cite bad managers as why they left organizations. The costs associated with bad managers are tremendous. We work with MBA students that hope to be great future leaders, and the role of emotional intelligence is vital. Tiffany and I are both certified in this one emotional intelligence tool called EQI 2.0. And this model does a great job at explaining the areas of emotional intelligence, which, for all the people listening, is not just empathy. Our emotional intelligence will steadily rise with age and it has no correlation to IQ or our intellect, with it peaking around 40 to 50. And there was even a recent research from the University of California, Berkeley, showing that EQ is rising steadily throughout our working lives, peaking at the age of 60, which I am thrilled to hear about. It means I have a little bit more space to be better at emotional intelligence. So let's dive into this fascinating topic with one of our amazing MBA students today, Holly Johnson. Holly, thank you so much for joining us. And the first question that we have for you is, what is the story behind your decision to embark on an MBA journey right now?
Well, doing an MBA has always been a dream of mine. It was a work in progress, and there was other steps that I needed to take first. But really, my decision to start right now was the need to heal myself and heal my family, and take the time that we needed to grow and improve ourselves and improve our situations, and find a way to move into uh, hopefully adulthood children, and uh, get through some of the challenges that we're currently facing together. So,
Mm. I really enjoy how each time we do a podcast, it just highlights how people come to the MBA program because no one journey is the same. And everybody's unique always, but I want to highlight a little bit of extra uniqueness in that you've described the MBA being part of a healing journey, which I think is really neat. And what an interesting place to enter the MBA from. I'm curious if we could start with looking back on Monday's class and the story that you got to tell, because every student did, about a manager, supervisor, team lead, camp counselor, someone in your life that you just really looked up to or you had a great experience from a leadership perspective. Can you tell us a story that you told somebody else in class?
well, it's going to differ a little bit in that I thought about it afterwards. And it really wasn't just the manager, it was my entire department. When I worked for medical microbiology and immunology, doing the graduate program coordinator position for them, I came in and covered for maternity leave, and it was coming right out of COVID. So, like papers weren't kept up and all of those sort of things. So my organizational skills came into to play real quick. And everybody in the department knew I was dyslexic and knew some of the challenges that I faced, and they were never viewed negatively. Everybody was warm and embracing and valued and appreciated my contributions, and really the appreciated the personal and the time that I took with each of the students and the supervisors, and my willingness to learn the role and do it as best as I could do. Um, and I never felt like it was a negative thing. It was always warm and embraced, and people would make adjustments. So make sure that I would have something that was in a format that I could read, and just little things, and taking the time. And I know that my direct manager was a big part of that, and he always supported me and encouraged me and gave me flexibility, and um, had the belief and the faith in me that I would get the job done and I'd do it right. Um, uh, and that speaks volumes when you can give your employees that faith, and when they can hold that faith, they're going to excel and do a great job for you. I truly, truly believe that.
I want to highlight some of the words that you just used of characteristics of the team, those on the team, and specifically your manager. I heard warm, embracing, supportive, faith, belief, flexible. Would you add any words to that around what you experienced?
Well, my new created core value of humanity. Um, when I was going through the list of value terms, and I started actually categorizing, okay, which one fits under which, and how can I put these together? And it's like none of these, there's so many things that fit in so many, and I came up with the core value, not on a list, and it's humanity, and I value that above most things.
Mm-hmm.
And when I can see that in others, it just allows me to be open and allows my caring to come through. And joining the MBA and coming to the department, to the business department, and my cohort, and seeing the humanity in every person that I've met here is awakened that love and that realization that that is my core value. And uh, I just think everybody here is just so special and unique and has it in them. And it's a beautiful place.
That's cool. And when we think about business, it seems always transactional all the time, right? It seems, we talk about terms like KPIs and what is our return on investments and all of these things. At the end of the day, if you invest in the people that are around you in a really positive, humane, humanity-driven way, think about how great business is going to be, right? Like it just in turn does that. So, what a wonderful, segue into how familiar were you with the term emotional intelligence before we came to this class? Was this something that you had heard about before? Was it something that you hadn't? What was that like for you?
I've heard it before. I've actually taken the test before, and was surprised in the variation in results. I also think that if I would have taken my EQ test even a week before, my results would have been a very different. And I think it's very reflective of the mental space that you're in at the moment, and your level of self-confidence, and um, your overall happiness with yourself and your life. And it really plays a big factor in your emotional intelligence. Um, I wasn't aware, like Tiffany had mentioned in class, that I was like really concerned because my empathy score went down. And I'm like, oh, is my life situation taking away parts of my empathy? And when she put it that, if you're if you have over empathetic personality, that can negatively impact you. And you don't make room for yourself. And when she said that, I realized, that's a big thing that was happening in my life, what, maybe 10 years ago when I took the test before, and caused me a lot of burnout. And
Hmm.
so maybe that score coming down isn't a bad thing. And
No.
um, yeah, it's maybe having a little bit more empathy for myself. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
It's interesting, and we'll get into this next class, so I don't want to spoilers on that type of content, but we often are really focused on as humans scores, right? Highest scores, lowest scores, and the power behind emotional intelligence, specifically the tool that we use, the assessment that you took, isn't about score, it's about balance and the understanding that if we are over indexing on something, if we have a really high score somewhere, that it's unrealistic and one might say impossible to just raise all the other scores up to meet it. To reduce some scores or to reduce at least the attention or the volume on them, if you will, allows space for other things to breathe. So a change in an empathy score, to your point, might actually be giving you the space to allow some of the other skill sets to breathe. Hmm. You just talked about, recognizing that your scores might have been different the week before just because life is a roller coaster. And the tie-in between emotional intelligence, perhaps, and growth mindset. And that's something that we talked about in class as well. Curious, we gave everybody an activity to go find something that was meaningful to you from a growth mindset perspective. A quote, a picture, something, and to create yourself a little poster. I'm curious what you created for yourself.
This is something you can see it. Is that?
Ah, lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the one that I made for me. I I didn't choose the phrases and quotes from that particular. I wanted the picture, and it was the picture of two children talking. And that spoke to me because that's when you have your growth mindset and you really are curious and you're engaged and you're seeing the world for the first time, and you have that just openness to take in information and ideas. And I think having a growth mindset is holding on to that inner child, that piece of you that just allows you to be creative and think outside the box and be a little different, but that's okay because you can keep that uniqueness and not have fear. I think as adults we develop that fear of being different, and
Mhm.
as we don't carry it as children in the same way.
Yeah,
And that's why I chose the picture,
awesome.
and decided to put the quotes inside
That's
that
awesome.
spoke to me. Yeah.
And the thing that I always find interesting, I've been doing this for quite some time. I have been facilitating classes. I have been iterating all of the topics that we talk about, whether it's a resume or a cover letter or your core values or your strengths, whatever it is. But we always try to interject some sort of fun into what we're doing and allow our playfulness to come out. And it speaks exactly to what you're talking about. It's we tend to not play as adults. We tend to just do the work that we're supposed to do. And you guys probably, as the MBA student or the MBA cohort, don't really realize. But one thing that Tiffany and I are always looking at is the energy of the classroom. So we start with a little bit of information, we do this, but then we throw this activity at you. It's coloring, it's creativity, it's the ability to just kind of just play and have fun. And then the energy switches and we allow like the creative muscle to flow. We allow fun to be had, right? We put music on, those kinds of things. And we believe it helps with the learning for everything, right? And that's where we're going to go into the model of this emotional intelligence model that we had. So we do the little activity, then we go into the model because the model's not the most exciting thing to be talking about. But what interested you most about this EQI 2.0 model that we shared with you? Was there something that you were curious about? Was there something you wanted to dive deeper into? What were your thoughts overall?
Um, Really, what I was curious about was the difference in scores, like the difference in the again, I know next class and with some of Tiffany's explanation of the change in scores, it really helped me to understand my results better. The only one that I really had a question on and maybe was a little bit more like didn't quite agree with the results was the assertiveness score, and it was a little bit low. And I can understand why that would be a little bit low because I don't think of myself as a very assertive person. But it says that I periodically offer my opinions, and I would say that it's not periodic. If anybody who knows me knows that it's not periodic at all. And I never associated my ability to be open with being assertive because I don't know what test it was where
The
we
big
had to
five.
test,
The
yes,
big
and
five.
openness, I got 100%. It was 100, and which isn't always a good thing. But but uh, so I just disagreed with that score a little bit in the sense that it's not periodic.
Yeah, I think that and I love that you're connecting two of the models that we have used, the big five, which is the ocean metaphor, which is great. So openness that you were talking about, and this EQI model. And for me and Paul, you can layer on anything else if your thoughts differ, but openness is a willing to share. Assertiveness often is the desire to have people then perhaps see it the way that you're seeing it, or to maybe try to um, change a point of view or flex the point of view of someone. It may not be all or nothing, maybe somewhere in the middle, but to me, that's a bit different than simply wanting to offer kind of a sharing of your opinion. And so there might be a nuance there that you and I can certainly pull apart for sure.
Yeah,
Oh,
and I
that would
Paul?
be
think
interesting.
yeah, no kidding.
Mhm.
And you know what's interesting? So, Tiffany, not to throw things right back at you, but you also have assertiveness, I
Mhm.
believe, as a little
On the
lower,
lower
right?
side.
And
Yep,
and
for sure.
then you look at some goofball like me that has maybe a little bit too much on the higher end of
Hmm.
things and really shares and uses emotions to kind of sometimes get, some agreement and things like that. It's
Hmm.
this is what we're talking about. There's a light side and a dark side to everything, and
Hmm.
there's like a place of balance for things, right?
Hmm.
And I think it's the ability to understand first of all what it means, and then second of all, how does that fit for me? How does that fit for the people I'm potentially talking to? Or is, if me being assertive is going to take somebody's emotions from like a 7 out of a 10 to a 10 out of a 10, I need to be able to meet that person where they're at, right? And so maybe I tone back the assertiveness and have it more conversational and we'll use like a more of a coach approach, right? Where we're like asking questions and things like that. So
Hmm.
there's different ways to look at it, Tiffany. Yeah.
Hmm. And I would point out, and so there's 15 different things that we talked about in class. And I think, Paul, what I heard you say was a little bit about impulse control. So if you have the ability to be assertive, if that's a familiar skill set of yours, do you also have the ability to control your impulses
Yeah.
around assertiveness and understand when to use them and when not, which is another skill set of EQ for sure.
Yeah. And when we look
Hmm.
at these buckets, and we'll go right back to Holly in 1 second, but these buckets of these groups of terms or themes or whatever we want to call them, for me, I was talking about I made a joke about being very assertive. The second highest thing that I think I have out of everything is impulse control. And so the ability to know when to use it and
Hmm.
when to not. So yeah.
Hmm. Holly, we also in class assigned every table to a specific skill set. We keep referencing these kind of 15 skill sets or themes. Which one did your table get? Because we assigned you to come up with what does it look like when somebody's really high in this skill set? And what does it look like when somebody's kind of lower on this skill set? Do you remember what your team kind of went through? Would you be able to share?
You gave us two. So
Ooh.
the first one was low emotional expression or the emotional expression, and then the reality.
Reality
Uh,
testing? Yep.
yeah. I think it's was it? I think that's what it was. Sorry, I can't read my writing. But I found this to be very challenging
Mm.
because when our whole group was thinking about what was low and what was high, when we were thinking about low, we went with negative. And when we were
Mhm.
thinking of high, we went with positive terms. And I don't think that that was the correct approach. Um, I mean, there's negatives and positives to both if you have a low or a high.
Mhm.
But it was just interesting that as a collective, our group associated low with negative and associated high with positive. And
Mhm.
yeah,
I think you make a really good point on the assumption, right? We're back to assuming high scores good, low scores bad. And so, actually, that might be an interesting point for Paul and I to take away that maybe it's not a high score or low score, it's effective and ineffective. Somebody who's really effective at reality testing, what does that look like? And somebody who is maybe ineffective at reality testing from an emotional intelligence perspective, so that we're not confusing, correct, these scores. Was there one of those that you had a thought on what it looks like when somebody does that really well? They're using that skill set really well, and maybe when they're not using it well at all.
see, and then like emotional expression, Paula talked about the poker game. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and that if you're good at hiding your emotional expression, that that would be an asset there. It's also an asset when you're like in a high stress crisis situation, if you're able to like bring in your emotions and not let them influence the situation that you're in. But like a downside to that is that if you're always hiding those emotions, you present somebody who's maybe a little bit standoffish and not so
Yeah.
approachable. And
Mhm.
there's you have to find that balance in there when it's even a safe place to express those emotions and be able to do that in those circumstances and develop that skill, right? Because it's not always a good thing to close them off, but there is circumstances where it's extremely important that you're able to.
Mhm. And I would point us
Yeah.
to that word perhaps of intelligence, emotional intelligence. Do you have the emotional um, library and intelligence to understand when it is to do what and your ability to flex? Hmm.
Mhm.
Paul?
And I think if I can add something in there, it's what happens if you don't even know what your expressions are, right?
Mhm.
Like it's, as someone who is very emotive, both like verbally and expressively, I sit here, I listen to people, I'm like, oh yeah, yeah, good. I understand that emotions can come across and you may have no understanding of what that even means, right? But I think when we look at someone that has a decently higher score, they'll understand what those expressions are meaning from other people. And I think that's it, that takes practice and that takes time. There's a reason why, as we think about this scale as it goes up, well, you have more experience, you can understand what emotions other people are feeling, right?
Hmm. Hmm. And I wouldn't mind to touch on this reality testing piece. And I don't know if your team was able to get to that. I know the teams that we gave two and we didn't give a lot of time, you may not have, but I want to make sure that we touch on that too. Somebody who's really talented at using the skill set of reality testing when emotions are present, what that looks like, and maybe when they're not so talented in that skill set. Did you have any thoughts about that, you and your group?
Well, okay, I can't read our chicken scratch, so it's but if from my own personal experience, I was a little higher in that, and I think that that's because I had to develop being able to read people's emotions and how in a way that how they are taking me, and it was more of a survival mechanism and something that I needed to develop. Uh, it also, I think, helped me to develop my empathy. Um, because when you can read somebody else's emotions, it's an amazing skill. Because if you can read it and interpret it and offer the help or the support or even just the listening ear, if that's what's needed at that time, you can react in a way that benefits the other. And it it calms, it just descales everything back to manageable. And um, so somebody that's high in that really needs to balance it with not just the other person, but themselves.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, reality testing really is the ability to understand bias, the bias that we bring and the bias that others bring, so that you can look outside of your own bias and test out other realities, just to use the exact same words as it. Paul and I will often use some version of a coaching question of what else could be true, right? Your perception is this right now. What else could be true? Are you able to see other different points of view to understand truly what reality might be? And often challenges your own bias or your own perception of that reality. And so, somebody who struggles with that would clearly be the opposite, that they've got one point of view and they're unwilling to challenge it.
Well, and that
Paul, would
goes
you add?
back to the
No, that's
mindset
okay.
model.
Hmm.
Because if you're more on the growth mindset than the fixed mindset, you're going to think of some of maybe the biases that were imposed on you as a child from your family or society. And as you grow older and you're like, well, I don't believe this, and why don't I believe this? And you're able to take in new experiences and new information and change those biases. Know that you had them, but let them go and
Yeah.
not carry them with you because they're damaging. Lots of biases are very, very damaging.
Yeah.
And there's some that we may never completely get rid of, but just know that they're really not yours.
Hmm.
Um, I love documentaries. Everybody knows that I love documentaries. And I didn't watch the whole Mr. McMahon one. I was getting it too negative for me.
Hmm. Hmm.
I only watched the few first episodes, and there was a one piece in there, and it was about there was a child, and he was happy, and he was enjoying the experience, and you could see the adults whispering in his ear to tell him what to say, and the change in the child in just
Yeah.
that short frame period, and
Yeah.
it's others imposing on this beautiful mind that
Hmm.
didn't need to
Hmm.
be imposed on.
Yeah.
And uh, yeah, it's just the willingness and the ability to let those things go
Yeah. Yeah.
and develop
Interesting.
your own belief or bias. You can have a
Yeah.
bias against somebody's bias.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
yeah,
And
yeah.
we think about this all the time. It's I remember a class that we were teaching around biases, and I had everybody close their eyes, and I started to talk about what does a CEO look like, and people were just describing what they were kind of mentally seeing, and it's an old you know uh white person that has gray hair, maybe missing some, and it's like we have these biases that we think that are true and accurate, but that's not what a CEO needs to look like, right? Like it's really interesting to understand our own biases, right? And I think Tiffany and we continually challenge our own biases to be able to work with individuals on a daily basis. So I'm so happy to hear that you are challenging your own and understanding your own. And I think that's so crucial and important to not only our own self, but our own emotional intelligence as well. So what are, one last question for you, and then I'll let Tiffany head into the lightning round. What are you hoping to build on when it comes to your emotional intelligence?
Well, I would like to develop impulse control a little bit better. I tend to like have an idea and go, and not I would like to have that ability to take that time and that pause and learn to develop that in myself. um I think it'll help decision making. It just it is a good thing to not just jump into things head first sometimes. um I don't know if there's any more. I'm sorry.
That can be a big enough one in and of itself. All of these pieces are really big pieces and they're connected, as you will learn next Monday. They are connected to a bunch of other things. So I look forward to working on that with you. Absolutely. All right. Shall we move on to a lightning round?
Sure.
Do it. All right. 3 quick questions, 3 gut answers. What is it about your career story that has given you the biggest boost?
I can't say all of them, can I?
Nope.
I'm gonna say coming here. Coming here.
Cool.
This has been the biggest need, I think.
Awesome. What's one thing you wish you had learned sooner?
Mm, do not stress over things that I cannot control. I'm still working on that, but yes.
I can subscribe to that. Service is really important to Paul and I, so we are always interested to hear how service is going to show up for you in the coming week.
I have a goal of every day doing one thing to help somebody else. It usually works out to more than one, but and it doesn't matter how little or how small or how bad I feel that day. One thing, just something simple. Yeah.
Awesome. And I have seen that. I have seen you do that. All right, Paul, what random question do you got for Holly?
You know, Holly, you and I, we have spent time talking about orientation, and we have been in classes together doing all of this personal development stuff. I don't know too much about Holly outside of the world of the MBA school, but I do see Holly walking around with an Edmonton Oilers sweater on every once in a while. So I would love to hear from you, your favorite Oiler, and what's going to happen this season.
See, I am an Oilers fan, but I'm an Oilers fan because I'm an 80s child. So I am not good with the stats and the players. I did go to a game last year. I got tickets given to me, which was very nice. It was the first game I got to go to since I was 19, actually. So that was very, very good. I love the Oilers, but I love the Oilers because I'm an 80s kid. And anybody who grew up in the 80s knows the
Oh, yeah.
80s era of the Oilers. So I'm really hoping for another repeat.
Great
Yes.
for the city, great for community building and all of those kinds of things. I love that answer. So great job. Thanks.
And I hear that you have an Oilers bias, that has been around for you for a little while, maybe just to, come full
Yes.
circle to that. Holly, thank you so much for being willing to dig into a complex topic. I mean, it's complex just from the model that we took you through. It's complex in how it relates to each and every one of our lives. It's called emotional intelligence. And so emotions can be a complex place. And so we appreciate your willingness to come in and to offer such relatable experience and thoughts on how you process emotional intelligence. I think we learn so much from each other. I know I watch you learning from others and for you giving the gift of service to have others learn from you. And it is such a beautiful way that you show up. I have enjoyed every one of our conversations. I know you to be a very emotionally aware and emotionally present person. So thank you for sharing that with me, and thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. All right, key takeaways. And I really appreciated her talking around kind of hanging on to your inner child. And I hadn't really thought about it that way. And as I was trying to stay present in the conversation, but my brain was now trying to chew on this new thought, was that, we actually do some things really well as children from an emotional perspective. Sure, there's a lot of maturity to gain, but I actually think there's some stuff that we lose, like she mentioned, some really great stuff that we lose that we had when we were children. And so, how can we either hang on to it? And if we didn't, how do we get it back? So that was a whole new thought for me. I was really appreciative of that. And I think I'll be chewing on that for a little while.
Cool.
Yeah. Paul?
Gosh, I want to share 2 stories with you. The first one is, and it makes me immediately think about what you talked about. So I have 2 kids. One is younger than the other. Obviously, they play some sports. And my son, he shows incredible empathy to other people when he's playing sports. He'll help the opposing player off the ground if they knock it. And and I think at some point we as athletes and sports people, we just kind of laugh at the person on the ground at the end, where really why can't we just pick people up? And I guess, hey, segue into what I was going to talk about for key takeaways, and that's humanity. humanity. And she talked about humanity and being really important. And emotions are a part of us being human. We shared a funny story. Well, I thought it was funny. I'm not sure what you thought, but at the start of at the class that we did on Monday, and I offered you the opportunity to take whichever slides you want, and then you took all the slides that were like the great ones, and I was like, oh
Yeah, I
man,
did.
and I was ticked off, and I was like, and there was an emotion of like, oh, what the heck, and but I'm like, hold on a second, like who gives a crap? Like it doesn't matter, and it was a playful banter, but like in the simplest of decisions, there are going to be emotions involved, and we as humans are going to experience those. But the thing I thought, and it's not to pat myself on the back, but it's like I was aware of them, and it was like, and I was able to verbalize them, and I turned it into a funny story for our students listening to it, right? And it's I hope that normalizing these emotions that come up for people are so important. But at the end of the day, I hope to be like my kid and pick kind of people up off the ground, right? So,
well, I wonder where your kid gets that from. Just saying.
His mother.
Yeah, nothing to do with you. Yeah. All right. So emotional intelligence is super complex. We said that already, and it means that we're going to talk about it again next week. So until then, see you later. Thanks for tuning in to the Career Boosters podcast. We hope you had a blast. Yeah, we know that's corny. Catch you next time, and remember to subscribe wherever you enjoy podcasts.